Okay, hi and welcome. My name is Arela and I'm from the program committee, and it's my honor to present our next speaker. Tim Riley is a core team member of Hanami, DryRB and RamRB, and a principal engineer at BuildKite. He's been writing Ruby for over 20 years and he still loves it. He works to bring the joy of Ruby to writing real, maintainable apps and all the shapes and sizes. So please join me to give a warm welcome RubyConf to Tim Riley.
I like that logo a bit better. Last afternoon, am I right? Is anyone else here feeling a little bit tired? How about we shake our bonbons and do something about this? We're into applications, fast tests, method calls. I've got a premonition, this gem's gonna stun us all. Let's go! Thank you. Yes, we're doing this. I'm Tim, and it is really exciting to be here at RubyConf. And it is the last session of the schedule, so I hope we can have some fun together this afternoon. It is, in fact, my first time at RubyConf, and my first time in San Diego. So I did a bit of research in anticipation of speaking here, and as you can imagine, I looked into the musical background of the city, and there's a lot of it, but being a child of the 90s, one thing stood out to me very quickly. I learned that this crew here, Blink-182, is a San Diego band, born and bred, which is super cool. You might remember this sort of setting as the clip of their breakthrough hit, All the Small Things, from back in 1999, which came out a mere few months after another song that we're going to get familiar with today, through which we'll be making our own extremely niche contribution to San Diego music history. Because yes, today we are going to explore a Ruby framework under the guidance of the iconic Ricky Martin. In fact, speaking of San Diego, I learned that Ricky Martin himself was here on this day in 1999 as part of his Livin, Vida Loca tour. So we are going to bring it back with a loving RubyConf reinterpretation of his hit song. So at this point, I will share a bit more about me. I'm Tim. Say hi to me on Mastodon. It's a fun place to chat. I'm Tim Riley at ruby.social. I work at BuildKite. We make fast, flexible, and secure CI/CD systems and more. And we do all of that with Ruby, which is super cool. And if you're a BuildKite user or fan or what have you, I have some stickers. Come find me afterwards. And in the Ruby open source world, I work on a few other things like Hanami, DryRB, and RamRB. And we'll touch on all of these as we go today, but we will focus mostly on Hanami. So what is Hanami? Well, it's an app framework for Ruby, and now's the perfect time to be sharing it because as of last year, we're now in the 2.0 era of Hanami, and I'm really excited for what it might bring to us all, not only for the unlocking different possibilities for our Ruby apps, but also what it might bring to each of us as Ruby developers. Now, as a project, Hanami's been around since 2014, and back when we released it, we described it as a fast and lightweight web framework, bringing a strong focus on testability and maintainability. And then a year later, the DryRB project began, and that's where I was personally involved at the time. And through this project, we were releasing a range of Ruby gems focused on solving common tasks in Ruby, but each one with the motivation of helping us all write more maintainable applications. So by 2018, both of our teams realized we were largely traveling in the same direction, trying to reach the same goals. So we teamed up, and a few years later, Hanami 2.0 came out, this time last year, and it brings all the power and flexibility of DryRB, along with a friendly and streamlined out-of-the-box experience. And in just a couple weeks, 2.1 will be coming out. We worked really hard to get it ready for around this time at RubyConf. We have a release candidate that you can already try out. So I'm really excited to share what we're bringing to you in 2.1 as we go through our journey today. Now, getting to this point was a true team effort. I might be the one sharing it right here, but I would like to share a shout out to all these legends, including my friends Luca and Peter, my teammates on the core team. And I have a few extra people to thank, courtesy of the wonderful community day that kicked off this conference. So I'd like to say thanks to Dan and Roman and Ariel. Dan and Roman are already writing their first PRs to Hanami, which is fantastic, and Ariel helped me debug a gnarly issue with our front-end asset preparation. So thanks to RubyConf and these three people for pitching into Hanami. So that's the team, but as for today, we're all on Team Ricky. So this means that from here, we'll be progressing through his song. And as we go from verse all the way through to chorus, we will we'll progress our understanding of Hanami itself. We'll see what it's like to get started with the framework and then learn more of its features. And from there, we'll grow our toy app into something more real. And lastly, we'll step back and see what this means for all of us living that life with Hanami. So let's get started building. This is how we'll get a feel for the framework. So like any gem, the first thing we can do is install it, gem install Hanami, and from there we can create a new app with the Hanami new command. And let's today call our app Bookshop. And already that's enough for us to hop into our terminal, run the Hanami dev servers, and from there we can open our web browser and see this lovely welcome screen, which is giving us everything we need to know to learn more about Hanami. We've developed this just for 2.1, so you'll see this in the release candidate, and it'll be the first thing people experience when they try 2.1.0 in a few weeks' time. Luckily, however, we don't need to click these links because we're all here together. So let's continue our tour directly. We can start by looking at the app class, and this is nice and simple. We won't need to spend too long here, but there is one thing to point out even at this stage, and it's that in Hanami, all our app code lives together in a single namespace, matching our app's name. So here we have module Bookshop. This is the module that all of our code will live within. Now from the app, we can take our tour across to the routes. And what we see here is a blank slate. We need to get started. So the first thing we'll need to do to make our app real is to go ahead and create an action. And Hanami gives us a generator we can use. So for our Bookshop app, let's go ahead and make a products index action, something that can return a list of products. And if we come back to our routes, we'll see that the generator has made one for us. And this looks pretty straightforward. A get request to products will take us through to that products index action. And here's the action that the generator made for us. This is a basic starter action. And the thing to know about actions in Hanami is that they're the places we handle all our app's HTTP logic. And we have exactly one action class per endpoint. And it's this handle method that's the most important part of each action, because that's where we tell it how to behave. And we can see here that we're given these separate request and response objects. And we can use these for doing things like inspecting the request params or setting the response body. Now, speaking of those params, Hanami gives us flexible param validation schemas. This can help ensure those incoming params meet our expectations, both in terms of their structure and their types. So since this is an index action, let's go ahead and add a couple of optional params here. One for a page number and another for a per page value. And in both these cases, if they're provided, we want to make sure these are integers and they're greater than 0. Now with this done, that's enough for us to go ahead and return an error response if any of those params are not valid. So we can see here that Hanami actions give us a number of different features that are helpful for managing that HTTP behavior. But what about our business logic? This is our index action, right? Where will we do the job of fetching the products to give back to the user? Well, to do this, we can get to know one of Hanami's most important features. And that is, in Hanami, our app is also a container. And a container here works as a central organizing object that's responsible for loading and providing access to all the components in our app. Now, what is a component here? Well, it's just our Ruby objects. Our action is already a component, and we can access it by using a key that matches its name, just like this. And then what we get back is an instance of our action ready for us to work with. In fact, any class that we put into app will become available as a component. So in this case, let's go and make a component for a product repo, something that can return a list of products for our action. And it could look something like this. Now, since we put this in the app repos directory, we give it a matching namespace inside Bookshop. And then we can add a method to find and return the latest products from our database. Now, this here is using the full-powered query API from the ROM-RB collection of gems. These are standalone Ruby gems that have been in use for many years and tested and refined in real production environments. And our plan for Hanami is to make these available to you in an easy-to-use way. So now our repo's done. We have two components. We have our action and our repo. But how do we get them to know about each other? What we really want is to use this repo from inside our action. Well, to do this, we can use Hanami's deps mixin. We can include this mixin inside any class in a Hanami app, and then pass it a list of components that we want to make available as dependencies, deps here being our shorthand for dependencies. And then those components become available as instance methods that we can use wherever we need inside our class. So in this case, it means we can use the latest products from our product repo and return a JSON response from this action. Now with this done, we can go back to our terminal and this time make a request. And we see here are our products returned to us as JSON. So that's a simple API. We're already making progress. But what if we wanted to build a more full stack kind of application? Something that can return our products as HTML? Well, for this, we can introduce a view. And just like actions, every view has its own class in Hanami. So this one here is for our products index. And like everywhere else in a Hanami app, we can include dependencies inside our view. So here we'll bring in that product repo so we can get access to our products where we need them. Now from here, the main job of views is to prepare exposures. These are the values that we want to pass over to our template and use to construct our HTML. So in this case, let's pass over those latest products. And then in our template, this is nice and familiar, we can just prepare the HTML however we need to get the response that we want to give our users. Now, since our views are classes in Hanami apps, this means they're components as well. So we can then bring it in as a dependency to this action we created earlier. And then in our handle method, we can render the view onto the response, and this will now return our products as HTML. In fact, since rendering a view from an action is such a common task, Hanami will take care of finding that matching view for us. So we don't even need the boilerplate and the typing of putting these dependencies up top here. So after this, we can run our server again and see our products come back as HTML. So well done, everybody. We've just made our first working feature with Hanami. Clap now, you'll see, because we're on to the next verse. We're into new sensations, new code broken up by slice. We've got a new addiction, our apps that feel precise. Thank you. And by the way, no ChatGPT was used or harmed in the preparation of this presentation. So now we've given Hanami a go, and we're in a great position to go and learn some more of its features. And to see what it really feels like to build these apps that feel precise. And there's no better place to start than with the testing experience. How might we test this view that we just created? Well, views, like every part of Hanami, are designed to be directly testable. We can call new directly on our view like this. And even pass in a test double for that product repo dependency. This will let us control its behavior for the purposes of this test. And now from here, that's enough for us to go ahead and call our view and assert that its output meets our expectations. Now, what we see here is a very low-level, isolated unit test. And for things like views or actions, we won't typically want to go this far. A more appropriate path to take would be to make an integrated end-to-end test of some kind, like a request spec or a capybara-driven feature spec. And these are available in every new Hanami app. But the thing to take away here is that because all the objects in a Hanami app are designed to be directly tested like this, it means we as the app authors get to make the best testing choice for each situation. So now we've interacted with our code through tests. We can also do this through the console. And in Hanami, you can load the console via the Hanami console command. And then when you're in, you can use this app shortcut to refer to our app. And from there, we can access our components that come back as instances ready for us to use and interact with interactively. And this console always starts quickly, no matter the size of our app. And that's because we provide a lightweight boot mode across all aspects of Hanami development. And we use this for the console, to running our tests, which is great for the really responsive TDD flow, even to starting the dev servers. So no matter how big our apps grow, all of our development interactions will remain snappy all the while. Now, another thing that Hanami does when it boots our app is load our settings. These are the values that we give our apps to help them run correctly in each environment, things like keys, secrets, and flags. And we can define our settings here. Say we want to extend our app now to send emails when new products are created. And to do this, we want to use some kind of third-party email API. Well, here we can add a setting for its API key and specify that we want this to be a string. Hanami will then load these settings from matching environment variables by their names. And when we're working locally, we can pull these in from .env files as well. And now, once that's done, we can access our loaded settings as another component in our app called settings. And it comes with methods defined for every one of the settings that we prepared. And remember how we declared the string type for this setting? This allows Hanami to give us early feedback if we ever boot our app into an environment where the settings don't meet our expectations, which is really good for safety because it means that we never get into an unexpected state as we work within our app. The other benefit of having this settings object available as a component is that we can bring it in to any class in our app thanks to the deps mixin, so we can confidently access our settings wherever we need them. No direct accesses to env sprinkled all throughout our app. Now, aside from our settings, so far we've only seen those components loaded from the classes that we create in our app directory. What about if we wanted a component that needed some kind of special handling as part of its setup? This is where providers help, and we need to make one now for our email service. We've already gone and created the setting for its API key. Now we need to go and use it. Providers have their own folder in config, and here we're registering a provider for our email service. And then inside each provider, we have a couple of lifecycle steps that we can work with. In this case, the first thing we'll do is go ahead and require the gem that will let us interact with this third-party email service. And then we'll grab our API key from the settings that we've just prepared, pass it in to configure an instance of this email client, and then we can register this instance directly in our app using a key called email service. So with this done, we can now use email service as a dependency inside any class in our app and be confident that it's the properly set up object that we've just managed here. So by this point, we've covered nearly everything we need to know about Hanami apps, but there's one more important thing for us to discover, and that's slices. Slices help us organize our app into separate domains or technical concerns, and they're a great way for introducing modularity and clearer internal boundaries to our apps as they grow. Now, if at this point you're thinking Packwork Packs or Phoenix Umbrella apps, then you're on the right track. Now, in a new Hanami app, you don't see slices up front, and that's because we want the apps to be as approachable and as simple as possible in that earliest state. But they are built in, and they'll appear as soon as we start putting code into the slices directory. So let's go and do that now, and Hanami gives us a friendly generator we can use. So for today, let's go and make an admin slice. And this will prepare an admin slice directory for us. And into this directory, we can throw, say, a products create action. And just like our app, every slice maps to a single Ruby namespace. So here we have admin. And then Hanami gives us an admin slice object that we can interact with to interface with the slice. And this works exactly like our app, offering access to our components, with the only restriction here being that it only loads components from inside the slice directory. And also like the app, slices come with their own deps mixin, just with the strain restriction. It only loads components from inside the slice. So now we've seen that both our app and slices act as containers for arranging and organizing our components. And then thanks to our deps mixin, we can clearly recognize the dependencies, the relationships between those components. And this starts to help us visualize our app as a big directed graph. And then from here, we can take things one step further because slices can import components from other slices. And this means we can now envision an equally clear graph of all of our app's high-level concerns. This is a powerful approach. Here we have the tools built right into the framework to help us organize our code at every level for easier understanding and maintainability. And slices help us with operational flexibility as well, because we can choose which slices we want to load for each deployment of our app. And one thing we want to do with Hanami is extend this power to apps of all kinds, not just web apps. Let's take a look at the gem file of a new Hanami app. And what we're seeing here is a web app because it includes the router and the viewer and the controller gems. But these are not fixed dependencies of the framework. This is why they're here in the gem file. So say we wanted to build something different to a web app. Well, then all we need to do is remove these extra lines. And with the one core Hanami gem that remains, we have all the quality of life features that we've just learned. We have the app, containers, components, depths, settings, providers, the console, even slices. And we can put all these features to use for any kind of app. So this means we get to keep everything we need and nothing we don't. So this means Hanami 2 is no longer just a web framework. It's an everything framework. Say we want to build a CLI tool, a serverless function, a stream consumer, or a chatbot. But for each of these, we still want all the conveniences that a full framework might give us. Well, now we can do it with Hanami. I'm not sure if Ruby has ever had something quite just like this, and I'm really excited to see where people might take it. So now we've seen every part of Hanami. Everything you see on the screen is released or imminently released in the next few weeks. So this means you have enough to build an API, or even now a full stack web app that goes all the way through to HTML views, along with fully integrated and fast to compile front-end assets. Now, because we're a small team who've been building this, we have been looking to maintain our quality and our momentum by releasing things progressively. So this means the database layer is coming next year. But by virtue of us using ROM, which is an already released Ruby gem and already stable, you can already preview what that support looks like. And at the end of this talk, I'll share an example app that does just this, so you can go in and explore what the full vision will look like. So now we know Hanami inside and out. You know what? I'm feeling a pre-chorus coming. We'll want to change our gem files and go dancing in the rain. We'll want to live the Hanami life. It'll take away our pain and bring new Ruby to our brain. Come on! And you know what? I got to thank the Department of Weather in San Diego for bringing us some rain. If you want to dance out there later on, be my guests. But for now, maybe a more productive thing to do would be to see what it's really like to grow our Hanami app into something bigger. To take it into production, if you will. And what I'll do here is share what I've been doing when I've been building production apps in this shape for the past 10 years. These are some really simple patterns that have held true over all this time. In fact, in a big way, Hanami 2 is an extraction of the code and experiences of building real apps like this and evolving them over all these years. So let's see how our little bookshop app might grow today. Now we'll start again with actions as the outermost layer of our app. We built a read action before with our products index. In this case, let's go ahead and make an update action now. And since we want every action to be as thin as possible, the first thing we'll do is bring in a dependency from elsewhere in our app. In this case, we'll bring in a command object whose responsibility it is to manage the behavior of updating a single product. And then inside our actions handle method, we can call our command, passing in from the params the product's ID and the rest of its attributes. And when this is done now, we can operate on its result. So in the case of a success, we can redirect back to the product path. Job's done. But if we see a failure, what we do here is re-render the edit screen along with any error messages so the user can correct their input. Now, even for a more involved action, this is still small and understandable. And that's because we push as much logic as we can deeper into the app and leave our actions focused on the high-level HTTP concerns and flow control only. So to continue growing our app, we need to go a step deeper. So let's go and look at this command. But first, just a note on structure. For our actions, we keep everything together underneath this top-level actions folder. This is because the actions form a cohesive layer in our app. They're the things dealing with HTTP, so it makes sense for them to live together. Now, for our domain, on the other hand, we can choose to organize by concept or concern. So here we can create a top-level products directory. This provides a home for any product-related functionality in our app. So for starters, this is where we'll put our command, but this can grow to contain more product-related details as our app evolves. So onto the command. Again, we'll start with some more dependencies. This time we'll bring in a validation contract as well as that product repo we created earlier. Now this command is callable with the call method here being its primary piece of public API. And then the first thing we do is run our product attributes through this validation contract. Now what we're doing here is the kind of attribute validation that you might typically see attached to something like a model. But we're doing it here with a standalone object. This means we can tailor the validation to each specific use case. It means we can pass the validation object around and use it in multiple places. It even means we can test the validation object independently, which is fantastic for when we have complex validation logic. And it lets us separate this from all the concerns of persistence. Now, we're not going to visit that in detail today, but this one here is built using the dry validation gem, which works really well with Hanami apps, but it's a standalone gem that you can bring into Ruby apps of all kinds. So once we've validated our attributes, if they're successful, if they meet our expectations, we can update the product via our repo and then return that product as a success coming out of this command. Otherwise, for invalid attributes, we consider this a failure and return those validation errors to the caller. Now, success and failure here are two sides of what we call a result object. This creates a wrapper over our command's specific return values. So it means the caller has to consider both the success and failure cases as first-class concerns. This is good for consistency, but it's also great for expressiveness, because this is what enabled that really nice use of Ruby pattern matching that we had back in our action. Results can also let us safely chain together whole sequences of different command objects that form a higher level business flow that short circuits as soon as the first failure is encountered, which is a really useful pattern for bringing together the higher level parts of our application's logic. Now these success and failure results come part of the dry monads gem, which again is a gem that fits perfectly with the structure of these apps in Hanami, but it's a standalone gem, so you can bring it into whatever Ruby app that you're working with. And new gem alert, we are working on building a new gem that's specifically designed to help you build high-level classes like this. Batteries included, everything you need, and it brings a focus on making our operations consist of a sequence of sub-steps that execute safely into a flow. We're calling this one dry operation, and the plan is to have this ready to bundle with our next Hanami release early next year. So we have one final step to take now. We can go one layer deeper and return to our product repo. And this should feel familiar. It's the same repo we made before. But now we can add more methods for creating and updating products in our database, which are the methods we exercised inside our command. And what we're doing here is beginning the journey of defining our very own persistence API for products. And over time, we'll grow this for each distinct way we want to work with products from our database. Like the simple case of getting a single product by its ID, or fetching a category of products, paginated, where the products live together in a category. And these repos can scale from the simplest queries all the way through to the most complex SQL, all while using the same query API under the hood. So this means these repos can now serve as our single, unified access layer to our persisted products. And by building these repos ourselves, we bring intentionality to this access, because we're the ones creating the methods, we're the ones picking meaningful names, and this means we can much more effectively manage how we interact with data from our database throughout our app. Now, adopting this repository pattern is one of the most impactful things that happened to me as I sought out how to build apps in this shape, because it has so many positive flow-on effects. And another one of these we can see is around what these repos return to us from their methods. And they return these kinds of struct classes. And they pick up matching struct classes based on their name, just like here with product. And these structs are value objects only. They're data, nothing else. No live connection back to the database, so no way to trigger unexpected queries from other parts of our app. So this means we can really confidently pass them to every corner of our app that needs them and be confident that things like n+1s from our views are now a thing of the past. And inside these structs, we can expand on how we interact with our data, just like we're doing here, by defining our own methods. And every attribute we select from our specific database queries will be available for us to use inside the struct, just like here with description. Our repos can return different kinds of structs too. All we need to do is specify the struct name in the query and the matching class will be used. So this shows how our repos can serve as our means of decoupling our app's business logic from the details of persistence. And then as our app grows, we can further emphasize this decoupling by choosing to name and center our repos around specific parts of our business domain's needs and not just leaving them as simple one-to-one mappings to our underlying database tables. So there's only so many steps we can take in our time together today, but if any of this is interesting to you, come find me afterwards and we can talk about how things might grow from here. But even from these extra steps, we've seen some key themes present themselves. Firstly, it's become clear that our app is composed of distinct layers. We've built an HTTP layer, our business layer, and a persistence layer. And as we worked within each layer, we did so with a focus on that layer's needs alone, because it was clear where we were located within the app. And then we provided clear APIs to interact across those boundaries without leaking internal details. And then within each layer, we've seen two clear categories of classes emerge. We have classes for objects that be, and then objects that do. Our objects that be are like our structs. These are the content of our app, the nouns in our domain. And on their own, they're inert. They don't achieve any functional outcome independently. Because we complement these with our objects that do. These are the active parts of our app, our actions, commands, and repos. These are the things that work with our content and with each other as dependencies to achieve that functional outcome for our users. And while we do have these two categories, they do have some things in common. The first one is that each class is focused on a single area of need, on its own particular task. And they choose to work with each other to achieve greater outcomes. And all of these objects are immutable. So when they're initialized, after that point, they will not change. This takes away the entire dimension of time when it comes to understanding our objects. This makes them easier to understand on their own, to test on their own, and this is the key characteristic that's necessary for us to be able to use these objects across all parts of our app and know that they'll behave consistently all the time, either as our structs being passed around our content or our other apps working with each other, forming our graph of dependencies. And all these properties and categorizations, the focused immutable objects, objects that be or objects that do, these are all embodied by the Hanami framework provided classes that we interact with as we're building our app. But they're not special to the framework code, because we can apply these same principles to the classes that we design for our own app layer. So in this way, the Hanami framework provided classes are informative. They serve as good examples for us to follow. And so in the course of coming into contact with Hanami, just by virtue of us building a Hanami app, we get we learn, we're empowered by these principles and patterns that we can use to help make our own code better. So that's it. We've grown our app, we've made fuller usage of Hanami, and we've learned some useful things across the way. You know what? I think we finally earned the chorus. Upside, inside, out. We're living La Vida Hanami. We'll gem, install it down. Living La Vida Hanami. Thank you. So here we are, final chapter. At this point, what does it actually look like to live La Vida with Hanami? Well, I'll start by sharing what it's been like for me. Because after nearly 10 years of building apps in this shape and then deciding I want to help build the tools to enable these for others, for me, more than anything, I describe it as a feeling. For starters, this was a feeling of relief, a feeling that I'd finally found a style of app construction in Ruby that clicked with my brain. A style of app where everything has a place and it's really clear how things connect. And from there, that evolved into a feeling of confidence because I finally felt that I could maintain a grip on my apps because through their very structure, these apps were giving me the handholds that I always felt were missing before. Now, getting to a new style of putting together code was a journey. But being able to do this in Ruby meant I could fall back on so many familiar things while managing the discomfort of learning something new. And Hanami does bring a range of new things. And it's not just a set of new framework features, it's a new opinion on what might constitute good app design. And I think we can all learn from this and turn this into our own growth as developers. So how can Hanami help us grow? Well, firstly, we can grow our understanding of our app's domain. And Hanami helps with this by making one important thing clear up front. The framework is not our app. These are separate things. The framework should work in service of our app, not the other way around. Hanami routes and actions, for example, are intended to serve as the thinnest possible outer layers of our app, gateways to our core business logic. And that logic is ours, and it's meant to be separate from the framework-provided facilities. So if this is the case, and these things are separate, then we have some extra work to do, because it's on us to figure out how to name and organize our code, to exercise our design muscles, to figure out the right arrangement of concepts to make our code the most useful expression of our business domain. And because Hanami makes it easy to decompose our app into those independent, focused components, this gives us the chance to really take control over the shape of our code. So much of this is about exercising and growing our modularity muscle, about boiling things down into those focused components, and then composing them together to create the high-level behavior that our applications offer our users. This really boils down to figuring out boundaries, and this is a practice we have to take across our entire lives as software developers. So we do ourselves a big favor by choosing to work with a framework that acknowledges this vital activity and then provides us the tools to reason about it, like Hanami does with its depths and slices. And lastly, this gives us a chance to grow our Ruby. For starters, if we follow from the core premise that the framework is not our app, it means so much more of our app can be written in what looks and feels like plain old Ruby. And that's glorious, because when we build confidence working with plain Ruby, we do wonders for our own abilities to think and problem solve fluently in this language. And we might even start to see Ruby through a different lens. What we might discover is that when we create classes that receive injected dependencies and then provide one or more methods where each method takes an input, does some work, and returns an output without otherwise modifying its internal state, well then this begins to look a little bit like functional programming, and that can bring so much more clarity to our code. And then when we pick up Hanami, we get to experience a whole new part of the Ruby ecosystem, because it builds on and around a rich heritage of gems. Gems that support Ruby apps of all flavors and play nicely with each other all the while. And we might find inspiration for our own code in how some of these gems solve their problems. So helping you grow like this is a big reason we're building Hanami. But there is another one too. And to explore this, we need to talk about Ricky Martin himself. And specifically, what happened around the release of Livin La Vida Loca. Now, to go on this journey, we need to transport ourselves back all the way to 1999. And yes, in many ways, it was a different time. But even then, Ricky Martin was already a superstar in the Latin world. His most recent album at the time, Vuelve, had already sold 10 million copies worldwide. But he was still a relative unknown among mainstream listeners in the English-speaking world. Well, this all changed with the 1999 Grammys, when he gave an electrifying performance of his World Cup anthem, Copa de la Vida. This one is worth checking out. Let's just take a little watch. I mean, what a party, right? I don't think you can find a more electrifying, energetic performer than what we see on stage in Ricky Martin right there. This was, in fact, the very first Spanish language performance at the Grammys. And as we learnt, the answer to, "Do you really want it?" turned out to be an emphatic yes, because this performance turned him into a global superstar almost overnight. Now, Ricky already had an English language album in the works, but Livin, La Vida Loca was brought forward and released as its lead single the very next month off the back of that performance. And it became one of the greatest selling singles of all time. And it's easy to see why. It's an infectiously fun song, and it brings together a fusion of different genres. We've got some surf guitar, some rock and roll, a bit of ska, and of course that heavy dose of Latin vibes. And it was this song that lit the fuse of what came to be known as the Latin pop explosion of 1999. Because later that year, we saw breakthroughs from other Latin artists, like Enrique Iglesias and Jennifer Lopez. And from there, we can draw a line to Shakira a couple years later, and maybe all the way through to Bad Bunny with all the success he's having today. So we have a lot to thank 1999 Ricky Martin for, in the music world at least. Now, at this stage, you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with Ruby? Well, for starters, I think I have an idea for my next novelty talk title. But it is, well, it's partly that, but it's more than that. What we've seen here is the phenomenon of crossover, of these performers finding appeal with a whole new audience. Just like we saw with Blink-182 when they hit the mainstream out of San Diego with All the Small Things. And I think it's exactly this kind of crossover that Hanami is poised to bring to Ruby. Ruby has a clear mainstream. It's big. It's full of wonderful people. But we're all largely experiencing the same music, the same set of Ruby tools. With Hanami, what we've been building is an easy and attractive on-ramp to something different, to a new kind of sound. And I have to think that if this approach had such an impact on me, well then there must be others out there ready to hear this too. Now, looking back on the 99 Latin pop explosion, it was really just one moment of what was a larger trend, that of the steady growth of Latin music on the world stage. And we can see this in effect by returning to the Grammys one more time, this time 20 years later in 2019, when this time it featured its first all-Latin opening act. This time around it starred Camila Cabello, celebrating her Cuban heritage with the song Havana, and she was supported by other Latin artists like J Balvin and, well, you might guess it, our man Ricky, who looks like he hasn't aged a day, I have to say. And it's this same story of longevity, of continuing steady growth that is true for Hanami as well. We're no longer some new kid on the block. We are building upon our own decade-long lineage within our part of the Ruby community. And what we're seeing today is a product of that. Now, with the advent of 2.0 last year and 2.1 soon enough, well, we certainly hope we can make this a moment. We'll use this as our chance to spread the word as far and as wide as possible, to spark our own explosion if we can. And if we succeed, I think we can turn this into an important moment for Ruby. Because inside Ruby, with Hanami, we have this real chance for crossover within our community, a new beat to dance to. And I think music is the perfect metaphor for this. Now, back in '99, no one said that Latin music is now the one and only way to go, and it's not the case for any other kind of music. No, this is, and nor am I saying here that Hanami is now the one way to build Ruby frameworks. This is like music. The more, the merrier. This is all additive. This is an infusion of different energy, and something that can become part, hopefully, of a much more diverse Ruby mainstream. Now, Matt's told us yesterday that community is the most precious treasure of Ruby. I love that wording. And I think if we can bring greater diversity to Ruby through efforts like Hanami or anything else, then we can help bring it vibrancy and help keep it growing, to help keep our community alive. And this will strengthen the community we all love. And we do love it. Saron this morning gave the most wonderful story about all of this. And the community is really our source of growth and happiness for everyone that stays around in Ruby. You would all know this by making the effort to come out to a conference like this. And like Saron also told us this morning, a language is not about what we build, it's about who we build up. And in this way, I think this can be a moment for you too. Because a tool is only as good as its community. And what is community apart from one person after another just deciding to give something a try and then sharing it with the people around them? So if you've ever desired a change to the way you're living La Vida with Ruby, well then may I humbly submit that Hanami is here for you. So if you'd like to learn more about any of this, go check out our website. We have a great getting started guide. The 2.1 version is already there. It'll help you build your first API or your first full stack web app. We have a forum where you can connect with other people building in the Hanami community. And even if you think you might not be able to bring Hanami back to your place of work or where you write most of your Ruby, I'd encourage you just to give it a try, because by coming into contact with different frameworks, well, you might at least pick up ideas, and we can translate ideas to wherever it is that we do our work. Now, if you'd like to see something that's growing up into a little bit more, I'm developing an open source example app, slowly but surely. It's called Decaf Sucks. It's on GitHub. So check that out. And lastly, I just love to chat more. So come find me at what remains of the conference. Find me on the internet. But otherwise, thank you very much for coming, for having me here. I've had a lot of fun. Cheers.